Good morning, everyone. Just as the chair said, apologies today. We'll need to elect a chair to stand in today temporarily. Can I have a nomination, please?
I nominate Steve Marshall.
Yeah, can we have a vote on that, please? Just hands up. Yeah, lovely. Councillor Marshall, if you wouldn't mind starting the meeting.
Yep, thanks ever so much, everyone. So today's scrutiny, obviously have to read out a script just to remind everyone about the rules there. So good morning, everyone. This scrutiny committee meeting is being conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government and Election Wales Act 2021, which will operate alongside the Council Standing Orders. The Council Standing Orders and Code of Conduct will apply at all times, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. A recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting, and Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request, and the images and sound recording may be used for training purposes within the Council. Thank you, colleagues. And can I just ask, first of all, if there's been any apologies?
Yes, obviously from Councillor Reach, Chair, and from Councillor Jenkins.
That's great. Thanks very much there. Just bear with me a second. I'm just trying to go back onto my form. Can you remind me what the next agenda point is? Is it declarations of interest?
Yeah, myself, my daughter's a social worker.
That's great. Noted there. And is there any other declarations of interest?
Yes, Chair. When it comes to children's services, I just want to declare that I work in children's care for a private company.
No worries. Thanks very much there. Thank you. Okay, so we've got the declarations of interest. We move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Is a colleague happy to propose, or is there any discussion points first of all there? Sorry, Councillor Harvey, are you moving that? Sorry.
Yeah, propose a true record, Chair.
A second.
That's brilliant. Thank you, colleagues. And yep, so we had a second, so they've been approved. Thank you very much there. So before we go into the next agenda point for the service area end of year reviews, can I just remind colleagues, due to the nature of Teams and the changes, we don't have the normal functions of hands up. So if I can just assure basically all colleagues online have their chat function open, and I'll be directed if there is any hands in the room just to indicate as well, just on the chat, to let me know that colleagues are wishing to speak, just to ensure a smooth meeting there. So that is that side on the technology aspect. So if we move on, so the first report that we have in front of us is the Education Services End of Year Report 24-25. Do we have someone to speak? Does the Cabinet member want to introduce first of all?
Councillor Marshall, I'd be delighted. Is it okay for me to start?
Please, thank you.
Thank you very much. The Education Service Plan for 24-25 supports significant progress in all priority areas over this one-year period. This is evident in the majority of outcomes. It's important to note that all 5 objectives and 28 actions in the service plan are RAG rated green. 18 of these actions are now complete and are likely to feature in the next service plan. The most significant achievement during this time was the ESTIN Local Government Inspection Report, which was published in December of 2024. This is a really strong report with outcomes that reflect the high quality of teaching and leadership in our schools and settings across the city. And importantly, it's noted how effective leadership is led by our education team. This gives us confidence that our children in Newport are provided with an excellent learning opportunities, and this reflects the ambitions that we set out in the corporate plan, which was agreed in 2022. It's important to note that there are no Newport schools currently in the statute category, and the local authority has effectively implemented its responsibilities under the Additional Learning Needs and Education Tribunal Act, Wales 2018, offering strong support to children with additional learning needs and their families and education providers. The service areas in its schools meet the needs of global majority pupils and those who are new speakers to English. The local authority has an ambitious vision for expanding Welsh medium education, clearly articulated in its Welsh education strategic plan and development of Welsh medium schools, with Ysgol Gwendly now settled and functioning well in Gwendly, enabling us to ensure a quality provision across Newport. The local authority manages education budgets well and addresses in-year financial pressures appropriately. Continuous support is readily available for all our schools to help them budget and plan effectively. Pupil attendance is improving due to the well-evidenced approaches we use in the local authority and in schools. A recent unverified national data capture shows that Newport ranks 4th in Wales for primary and secondary combined attendance, and the preschool meals data is above the Wales average. Verified data will be available in the autumn term of 2026. We have so much to be proud of, but what particularly makes me proud is how, as councillors, we all see it as part of our role to become a school governor, to not just support effective governance, but to become actively involved in helping our schools to improve their offer to children in their communities. This is something that we all take very seriously, and I'm convinced it helps make a difference. Not all local authorities have the expectation that councils take on this role. Finally, thank you to all the teaching and ancillary staff in our school who go over and above to educate and support our children in their learning. Learning cannot happen if a child is hungry, cold and lacking sleep. Schools, with their focus on the communities, are working hard to help tackle these issues. Our staff are amazing. With the end of term rapidly upon us, they all deserve a wonderful summer break. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Cabinet Member, for that introduction there. Can I ask, is any of the officers wishing to speak, or are they willing just to go into questions, please?
Councillor Marshall, we're happy to go into questions, thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much there. I'll start with my colleague, Councillor Watkins there. If you want to come in, Councillor Watkins, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions. Total 4 now, so I'll just take 2 to start with and let somebody else take up the others. If they don't, I'll come back. Okay, the first question is the overspend of 965k, 965,000. I'm really concerned about this, considering education have added extra finance. How are we going to reduce this and get rid of it by the end of the financial year? The other question is about EAS. How is that reduction in authorities with EAS going to affect NCC's contribution, and whether there's going to be a reduction in personnel with EAS? How is that going to affect NCC long term?
So, Councillor Watkins, in regards to the 957k overspend, obviously that was at the end of March 31st this year, but obviously in the new financial year now. And when you track back to this, is the first time that education services has been overspent probably since 2016, so it is highly unusual. And we try and manage within the parameters of our budgets. And I think the extra money that's been awarded to education has been for schools rather than service areas specifically, although all service areas across the council would have been in receipt of inflationary rises. Those would have been factored into the forecast budgets. This particular area was linked to passenger transport, so it was for transport for pupils, either in mainstream transport or in SEN transport, so those pupils receiving specific taxis rather than the larger vehicles. And this was a council-wide issue because nobody could have predicted the significant inflationary charges within that area. So whether adult services would have experienced the same, and so would children's services. And we responded really quickly when we saw the forecast rise in transport costs that we, as a council. And that's been corrected now in terms of what the budget should be, because it was never going to reduce and there was nothing we could do about it. It was a demand-led service, given that we have to follow the learner travel measure for Wales. So it is the statutory provision for transport. So the finance team, senior colleagues in the council have made sure that budget is now appropriate moving forward.
Right, so we can be assured that that overspend through passenger transport will not happen. We
do our best to forecast as a corporate management team. We're working with the intelligence we've got on the ground through monthly forecasting and through budgeting, budget monitoring. So to the best of our knowledge, it appears to be appropriate, that level of budget for the anticipated services. Of course, you never quite know, do you? Because that's what the budget monitoring is for. But because we're commissioning those vehicles and the taxis, there could be changes that are outside our control.
So with regards to that, are we looking at an increase in the use of the passenger transport for children that need taxis?
Yeah, there is certainly more children than there used to be accessing taxis because of their additional learning needs than there were perhaps 5 years ago.
Are we looking at an increase over this financial?
Yes.
So have we budgeted for that?
Yes.
It's also worth pointing out, obviously, that last year we had children from St Andrews being transported to the Connect Centre on Menkefield Road. That arrangement has now ended because those children are all back on site. Although, of course, we do still have the children from Millbrook who are being transported to Bringlas. So that's an extra cost, but that has been budgeted as well.
I think the important thing to note as well is not only is it a demand-led service, but there is also a limited amount of choice in the contracts available to the council.
So you haven't looked at alternative?
There are alternatives.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Sorry, apologies. I thought that was the only question. Yeah, is there another question there, Trevor, as well, please?
It was about the EAS and how is that likely to affect NCC and the contribution which we paid EAS, and whether they're going to reduce facilities support for NCC.
So the core contributions to the EAS from the Newport City Council, there's no cost increase at all. That's good for our budgets. The other good news is that when you consider the education grants that are coming into the local authority and are passported to our school improvement service to provide those services to schools, the delegated rate to schools hasn't changed, because what was important is we didn't want to destabilise the grants available to schools because they very much needed that money. So that was a real priority for us. Now, with the partnership going from 5 local authorities across Gwent to only 4, because Caerphilly are no longer part of this partnership, or won't be from September 1st, yes, there are economies of scale that need to be made. So there is a new staffing structure that's in place that's fit for purpose. However, when we look at our business plans moving forward, which should also be authorised by the joint executive groups of cabinet members, there is no change in service. We're still able to provide the same level of service that we have previously. And so we're really proud of that work in the sense it's given us value for money, the same high level of service and the same level of support for schools.
Who would have would get the notification of the structure?
That would be the EAS company board, where we have representation from elected members in Newport, directors of education, and the joint executive group of cabinet members.
The reason I've asked, because somebody has asked me, is the head of EAS or going to?
Oh, that remains the same managing director as there always was.
Right. So, okay, Chair, that's my 2 questions. Let somebody else question.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Watkins, for that. Before I go to Councillor Harvey, I think it's a prudent time that we bring in Councillor John Reynolds. Just, I know you had questions about leadership, and I think it naturally sits within the scope there. Councillor Reynolds, would you like to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was just wondering really about leadership across the city in terms of the schools that we've got. I wonder if you could just make some comments about is there like a consistent and collaborative approach across the city in terms of things like managing resources, managing budgets, policies, etc., and things like IT contracts? So is there a consistent and collaborative approach in terms of all of that? And if you do have any schools or leaderships that maybe prefer to operate as lone rangers, if you like, what procedures have you got to try and bring them back into the fold? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so Reynolds, we operate on an approach to tight collaborative working, especially when it links back to council-wide contracts, because the more schools are involved in, for instance, contracts aligned to SRS, the better value for money each individual school gets. It's also the same for service agreements with health and safety, etc. We would want the maximum amount of schools to buy into it. I think what's interesting is schools that don't participate in central contracts often have to ask them additional questions that we would normally know as part of our contracts. So some good examples are, if you're part of SRS, we're familiar with their firewalls and their levels of digital security, because that's set out in the contract. For those schools that are out of contract, we have to ask additional questions that those schools need to respond, because we have to have complete confidence that their digital security, their safeguarding, is of the same standards that we expect from the rest of our contracts.
Yeah, so that's why I particularly asked. Oh, sorry to interrupt you, but that's why I particularly asked about IT contracts. That was exactly why. Yeah, thanks.
But we never let that go. If a head teacher that's not part, or a governing body that's not part of that contract, if they do not give us a satisfactory answer, we still continue until we get the satisfactory answer, because that's about the care and safeguarding of our children and young people in school. So that never stops. There are often where you notice patterns, I suppose, emerging of schools that choose their own routes and are not part of a more collaborative group. There are private conversations that would happen just to make sure that there are checks and balances of how schools know how to work in conjunction with the local authority, and we talk about the benefits of doing that. But ultimately, the governing body has a delegated budget, and schools are entitled to spend that delegated budget as they wish, providing they're showing good value for money and that they are working in the constraints of that budget. I think if you're going into a budget where it is looming into deficit, it's a local authority issue, and we'd have to make sure that there were the right checks and balances. And we're fortunate that we've got an experienced deficit recovery team that don't just work when a school is in deficit, but it prevents the deficit. And Deborah's part of that team, as is our finance business partner, and they have worked with schools that are at risk of going into deficit, and exercises of checking school spend to see if there are better ways of presenting economies of scale, etc., better value for money to prevent that risk of going into deficit. And we would always ask that team to go and work with an individual school if we were unsure of the choices that they were making.
I mean, yeah, thanks for that, Sarah. That sounds really comprehensive, to be honest. I mean, it does sound like there are good procedures in place for trying to ensure that there is consistent safeguarding across the city and financial safeguarding as well. Come to that. So yeah, thanks very much. I do have other questions, Chair, but obviously they'll probably fit into the meeting a bit later, so I'll leave that for now. Thanks.
No, thanks very much, Councillor Reynolds. I will, as promised, bring in Councillor Harvey with your questions there, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. The free school meals pupil attendance is still below average, and the fixed term exclusions have gone up. Obviously, we don't want to put fixed term exclusions in for our children, because that unfortunately just leads to even further issues further down the line. So what's being done to close the attendance gap for pupils on free school meals? And are we seeing any early signs that the new behaviour strategy is helping to reduce the exclusions?
Okay, so Harvey, if I take the attendance question first, and then I'll pass over to Katie to give you some reassuring news about the exclusions and the unverified data. But I've got some good news about attendance, because we've always said in Newport that the structures and methodology that we use around attendance, it was important to hold our nerve and not to just change into something else. And we ask schools to hold their nerves. Now, whilst you're seeing that on that data set in the end of service report, that we're just below the FSM average for attendance in primary, the headlines are for Newport in the unverified data set that we are above the average for FSM. And in fact, Newport is 4th in the whole of Wales for attendance with primary and secondary. And Newport has never been 4th. In fact, our best ranking position has been 8th. So this is a significant demonstration of the pacey work that we've done and the benefits of holding our nerves with a set methodology that works. So I'm hoping to be able to come back to you in the autumn term to talk to you about the verified data.
Thanks, Sarah. If I can just come back on that quickly, we're 4th, which is amazing. Is that including free school meals, or is that general rule of thumb for all of them?
4th is overall with FSM and non-FSM children, but we're also being told in that unverified data capture with Welsh Government that we are above the average for FSM. So you can see that we've made that pace there where it's necessary.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Just to, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Marshall. I was just going to comment on the exclusion question.
Please, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. So the last national data that we had out for exclusions were actually first in Wales for exclusions at over 5 days, because we worked really hard with our schools to reduce the time that pupils off-site, that we have short-term. So we have started to see an increase of the short-term exclusions that are less than 5, because we have that significant reduce of longer-term exclusions. So we knew that would happen, but we see that as a way to reduce the school pupils' time off-site and look at appropriate interventions for those young pupils. So we are seeing positive results with the exclusions across the board. We've worked really hard with our secondary schools in particular around graduated responses for behaviour youngsters, because there did seem to be a parallel of ALN with behaviour. So you have behaviour needs in schools and ALN goes separately, and never the twain should meet. But we've worked really hard to join those processes together to make sure each pupil is seen holistically and the support is in place for the challenges they face. So we've done sessions with the behaviour lead and the LNCO to look at those joint systems and making sure that the management panel representatives are there in those meetings so that we can ensure the right support is in place for those young people. We analyse our exclusions data by FSM, by BFSM plus different ethnicity groups, and we are not seeing any particular element there. The one element that is the one that's outshining is the ALN young people, because obviously behaviour is classed as an additional learning need. So we just need to make sure our schools are meeting the needs of those young people. So they need to be understanding that behaviour is a way of communicating something. So we need to understand what they're trying to communicate and how we can meet their needs. And we've got very complex young people across the city, and we cannot do this alone in education for some far more complex young people, because they may be involved in the youth justice team, they may be involved with Newport Live and their prevention services as well. So it's about a joint approach for our most significant learners to help reduce those exclusions, but give them those bespoke patch of support. So it is multifaceted what we do. We also got, as I mentioned last year, we developed a harmful behaviours policy with the police, with social services and youth justice. That is working extremely well, but there are other elements now we want to expand and look at that in greater depth. So that is going to be on the service plan for next year, because that is another way that we're helping to reduce repeated behaviours. If something happens in school, it's that multi-agency bespoke support to give that young person either a fresh start in another school, or to address their needs and maintain them within that school. So the behaviour strategy is in draft form being consulted on this summer, autumn term. But what we have had as well in the interim is the Welsh Government Behaviour Summit. So we've had representatives from all over Wales. So rather than put behaviour strategy straight out, we want to reflect on the outcomes of the Behaviour Summit to make some adjustments before going back out there to consultation early autumn term. But although the strategy isn't launched and public yet, the groundwork for that graduated response and support with schools is ongoing. So we do envisage the exclusions to keep reducing with the support that we're putting in, and the ones that are happening would be the most significant ones that we need the multi-agency support for those people.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks very much, and my apologies, Katie. I'm trying to read the room. I've only got a small box, literally, for the camera, so apologies if I was speaking there. Thank you. I've got next is Councillor Davis. If you would like to come in with your question there, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, several of the questions I had have already been answered. On the back of what you were saying with regards to the behaviour strategy, is it being monitored for impact?
Yes, we track the exclusions to see if we're seeing a reduction over those. We also track the numbers of management pupils. So if they're having a fresh start across the city, how many pupils are having those fresh starts, how many of those are successful, and we track then their attendance and their engagement with the new school as well. So it's the wider support. Part of our strategy as well is looking at the provision within the schools and outside of schools. So as a local authority now, we've invested in the next 2 years to expand the Aspire provision at Newport High School, because we felt that there was a need for additional provision and support from our services, but also we commissioned Newport Live to work collectively with the school and us to have that provision, which is an off-site provision. Aspire is currently at John Frost, Diswary and Llanwern, and they've had excellent success, and the qualification of those youngsters has gone through the roof, to be honest. And these are youngsters that would be disengaged on the main school site that need something different to engage them, and the programme works really well. So we're opening the Newport High one on 1st September now this year. So we'll be monitoring that, and all these higher provisions are monitored. Our officers go out to quality assure the provision to ensure that everything's safeguarded and the quality of the teaching and learning is appropriate and the environment is right for our young people. So we have the quality assurance. That's one of our actions actually from this year, is about quality assuring the provisions that we've got as well, to make sure they're right for our young people and where they're having the impact. Because if they're not, why are we investing in them? So we always are very reflective and always looking at quality assurance and the impact of our provisions.
I have heard of Aspire and how important it is, and how well it is doing as well.
That's really lovely.
Just another quick question, going by what are the root causes behind the sharp rise in year 11 lead figures?
Thanks, Marcus, to take this. So there's we've done a big piece of work on diagnosing really that sharp rise, and some of the significant issues are certainly that training contracts available for 16-year-olds to 19-year-olds fell by 21% last year. So the places available in those training contracts are just not there. And that's significant because actually those children, young people that are not engaged in academic pathways and are certainly more equipped to be vocational, that was their pathway. So that's made a significant impact. Other issues are certainly linked to the number of young people that perhaps weren't attending school because they were electively home educated for a variety of reasons. They might have been EBS children that we call them. They've got emotional school-based avoidance. Some of that anxiety links back to the pandemic and some of those missed times during school, and they find it really difficult to re-engage. And of course, whilst they weren't tracked in school, they then emerged as young people not in education, employment and training at the age of 16. So we've got a big piece of work now to make sure that we are doing more intense work. We've got to re-look at what we're doing and change direction in light of those training contracts not being available. So we've got a new refresh work plan to make sure that there's a reduction in the amount of NEETs for this October, which is the Kent date. We had 63 young people last year that in year 11 that were regarded as not in education, employment and training on the October 31st cut-off date. A fortnight later, 23 of those young people were in employment, education and training. There is a census cut-off date, of course, for everybody. So those children were not factored in, but it's simply not good enough that the volume of young people did not have a place on that date to go to.
Is there a particular reason why some of these pathways have dropped off?
It was linked to Welsh Government funding levels. And actually, what we've even looked into is, can we set up our own training contract provider? We can't. It's not something that's within our gift. So we've looked at a variety of different avenues. Some interesting things that are going to go on this year is we've re-established a strong connection with Colleague Gwent. And at this moment in time, we've done intense work with our secondary head teachers and some senior leaders in the schools. And they're tracking any young people that would be at risk of not being in education, employment and training from this summer. And we are working hard to find those places, those bespoke places for each of those individuals. And what Colleague Gwent are doing for us is they're looking at those young people's names, cross-referencing them with their current applications and seeing if those young people have been missed off in any way. And we're creating an additional enhanced transition event where we'll put buses and things on in the summer holidays to take that group of young people to Colleague Gwent to try and find them a course which appeals to them. Or if they need some further help, or they need their confidence raising to be able to go to college and just set their foot through the door in the first instance. And if that's not there, that's not going to work, and we'll try and find something else that will. But we want to make sure that we've got a better insight into that group again. We've done it year on year, it's worked for us, but that doesn't mean to say that you can rest on your laurels. You've often got to change direction and enhance the way that you work even more.
So it's not necessarily young people don't want to do something else, it's because the pathways are no longer there.
Well, a bit of both. Some of those young people, we set them into tiers, and sometimes a tier 1 young person is involved with so many other agencies. So, for instance, child and mental and adolescent health support, that they actually just are unable to engage. And there will always be a group of young people that can't for medical reasons, but it's trying to find opportunities where we can. And if they're ready at a time in their life, we've got to be there for them. That's important. So just because you might be a tier 1 young person regarded as that at the moment, it doesn't mean to say that in 3 weeks' time you will be. We can't take that for granted. We've got to keep revisiting. We do door knocking as part of the service as well. And we, as I said, there will always be an agency that works with that young person for whatever reason, and we liaise with those agencies too.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much then. Just to piggyback off the back of that question, I suppose, I know we said about the Colleague Gwent side of things and route into education and courses. I suppose on the back of that, it's just to ask for reassurance that also apprenticeships and working with local businesses for work opportunities is also being considered as part of that scope.
That generally comes through regeneration as part of the council through the Newport Youth Academy. So they facilitate that work on behalf of us, but what we've also done is re-establish the Youth Service Support Board. So a number of head of services join it together to make sure that we're all aware of each other's situations. So a good example is head of region sits on that board, so does the head of preventions and inclusions, because preventions and inclusions also post youth services. So we're looking for as many opportunities to work together as possible, and we are currently trying to source additional funding for Newport Youth Academy to extend the number of placements.
Thank you, Sarah. Obviously, I know the work of the Youth Academy myself on a personal level, but just to reassure colleagues obviously in the room that there is other scopes other than educational routes, so that's very helpful for the committee today. So I do appreciate it and thank you for that answer. I'm going to ask, does Councillor Cleverly want to come in with any questions or points on this part? I know we haven't heard from you, just to double check there.
Yeah, it's capital maintenance budget.
So, sorry, Councillor Watkins, I'm just checking in with Councillor Cleverly if she wants to come in, and then I'll come to you as another round.
The only question I've got, thank you, Chair, is what areas are they targeted from? Do they go to every estate in Newport? Because there's lots of young people in Dufferin, Ringland, Bettis, you know, every estate there's young people just hanging about the streets, and I'm sure they could be targeting more young people of that age group. Thank you.
I think we do target, but what the difference is between young people that might be hanging about the street is not to say that they are not registered with somebody. And if they're registered, that organisation would be tracking that young person. So, for example, if there was a young person that was assigned to Colin Gwent would be taking note of their attendance and their well-being and reaching out. So the perception can be, can't it, that young people that might be hanging around are not in education, employment and trade, they can be registered. It would be impossible for the council to be able to check up on any young person sort of that appears not to be in that position. We can't go up to people and tap them on the shoulder necessarily. There is, you know, youth work that goes on, but again, youth work is limited. You know, it's youth work. Our youth service does amazing work, doesn't it? But it also does outreach work. But it would be impossible for us to be able to, as I say, tap everybody on the shoulder and ask where they are when statutory education ends at the age of 16. We can do it before that age because you should be in school. So it's a bit of a complex issue, but we are certainly doing the preventative work, the door knocking, etc. Every address in Newport where those young people fall into that category.
I was just going to say that Careers used to have a list of the young people who just left school. And yeah, so you obviously work closely with Careers.
So we've got a service level agreement with Careers, and we did to share everything. We got to a proper agreement around that, and yeah, so there's one set of data of those young people at risk and haven't got a place, so we work collaboratively to make sure that we get them a place.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Cleverly. I think we've heard from most councillors, so I'm going to do a round robin. Councillor Watkins, I know you wanted to come in, and thank you for your patience there. Would you like to come in with your question, please?
I've got two questions, really, Chair. First one, going back to EAS and the school improvement partners. Have all the schools now been allocated partners?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The other question is on the capital maintenance budget. I noticed that you had 800,000 in regards to December 2024, which is being used to target buildings and concrete. Now, I was unaware that we had an issue with concrete. Is that
Yeah, it's just information that's being reported to us through NORS as and when they do inspections of schools. So it's just looking at those issues that arise incidentally. So that there was an issue with concrete a few years back, you will recall, St Woolas and Crinder in particular were schools that were affected by them because of the age of the buildings. Those issues have not been repeated. These are other issues that might have been identified regarding the kind of the infrastructure of the school buildings as these inspections are undertaken.
the programme? It says the council is continuing to work with local developers in relation to the Welsh School and Great Milton Park in September 2026. Now, is that programme on track, and is there likely to be a requirement for extra financial help?
Wants to take that?
We're consistently liaising with the developers, and there's nothing to report at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Watkins. I will go to Councillor Bev Davis. Do you have any other questions there, please, Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks very much there. I will go to Councillor Deb Harvey there. Would you like to come in with any final questions or anything like that, please?
Nothing for me, thanks, Chair.
No worries, thank you. And to Councillor John Reynolds there, please.
Thanks, Chair. I've got two quick ones, if that's all right. The first one should be a really quick one. It's just on the report, there are lots of actions being shown as complete, which is obviously really encouraging, very positive. I was just wondering if you could just maybe go into a little bit of detail as to what ongoing monitoring there is of those complete actions, just to mitigate the risk of them being filed as done, if you like, and then filed on the shelf rather than being dynamic actions and being constantly monitored.
I can give you some good examples, Councillor Reynolds, is that okay? So, for instance, one of the first ones is around school self-evaluation processes, where in Newport this year the piece of work was linked to ensuring that there was a set methodology and consistency of approach across the local authority, because we're finding variance in the standard of self-evaluation. We know now that variance appears to have been reduced. It's not a common inspection recommendation in our schools. It's coming out as good, but it's a type of subject matter that you can never take your eye off the ball with. And so when we meet with the head teacher and the chair of governors from each school every year, we look at their school development plan. One of the first things we talk about on that agenda is what monitoring and evaluation activity took place in order for you to identify your priorities for this year's school development plan. And we ask our head teachers and our chairs of governors to describe the methodology they used, how they triangulated evidence, and how they're quality assuring their work. Because it's so fundamental to the basis of school improvement that the quality can never drop off. So the conversation needs to stay alive. So the large piece of work was completed. There's been there's good professional learning that's alive. So a good example is two of our head teachers, Dean Taylor from Hedrepoeth and Cat Place from Jubilee Park, are leading those pieces of work as head teachers, and they're leading other head teachers to come into their school and demonstrate good practice in self-evaluation. That will continue to roll. Because head teachers will be sending out their other senior leaders to go and see that. So, for instance, Dean had something like 30 head teachers in his school watching live practice only a few weeks ago. But we will continue to revisit and talk about the issue. That's one example of how an action was complete, but it will carry on. But we'll keep our eye on that issue because it's so important. We've got regular monitoring and evaluation in our service area where we look at over, gosh, it's about 42 themes over a 2-year period where we consistently revisit the important themes in education. So we do a monitoring and evaluation report on what do we do to impact pupil attendance. So it's nothing's ever done and dusted. We look at the value for money we present with capital maintenance projects. We have another monitoring evaluation looking at, how do we ensure that there's good quality assurance and safeguarding processes with our external providers? Yeah. So it is a continuous cycle to do checks and balances and look for reassurances to give the cabinet member, to give exec board and the rest of CMT that our practices are appropriate and right to keep schools and the local authority in a good position.
That's great, thanks, Sarah. I mean, to be honest, that's exactly the answer I was expecting anyway. But it is nice to hear that said out loud sometimes, especially in a public forum like this. So I appreciate that. I've got to say as well, I'm a governor at Jubilee Park, and I've got to say that, yeah, I mean, Kat is an absolute inspiration as far as her head is concerned. She's absolutely brilliant. On to my second question. This possibly could be a little bit unfair, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I'm well aware that education policy as a whole is obviously devolved to Welsh Government rather than local authorities. But throughout the report, there were lots of comparisons made in various areas to other Welsh authorities. And I know some people, when you look at other sort of sources of data, such as PISA results and so on, people might say that looking at Welsh authorities might be a comparison to quite a low bar. Whether I agree with that or not is just another matter, but that's what might be said. So I'm just wondering what comparisons are made with maybe bodies outside Wales, international comparisons and so on. Are there any barriers to making those comparisons, and then maybe putting measures in place so that Wales as a whole, but obviously particularly Newport, can bridge that gap? If that's an unfair question, please forgive me. And because I know really overall policy is devolved to Welsh Government. I get that.
It's really difficult for us to find benchmarking data. That's hard because so we don't tend to use the data sets, but we can find out where good practice exists, and the good practice case is either worldwide or UK based, which describe some of the impact that they've made. So a good example is when you look at Ontario's work in Canada around ALN reform. We've often looked at best practice case studies there. We've looked at outside of Wales for attendance set methodology of what works. We looked at the Queen's Academy in Birmingham, looking at what works in terms of exclusions. We've looked at where we've got unique cultural diversity in Newport. We've had to often look outside of Wales to be able to find we've got the same type of cultural mix and what works for those local authorities in terms of attendance and attainment. And again, we've been able to work with other schools where we've matched up some of our schools that have got a high proportion, for instance, of Roma learners, and they've completed visits to Birmingham, and that's been really helpful. So we're always looking outside of Wales for the good practice bits and to see those where possible live and to do the visits. But the data can be difficult to both acquire and to know that you are comparing like for like, because the way that the Welsh data sets are put out, we're able to compare not just the outcome of, for instance, attendance, we're also able to look at the school size, the funding levels for Welsh schools. We're able to look at the wider set of factors to know we're looking at like for like. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, to be honest, you've actually picked up on the 2 points I was going to raise as a follow-up question, which is that like-for-like comparison. But you've covered that already. And I've lost my train of thought now. What was the second thing I was going to say? It doesn't really matter. You've covered it anyway. So thanks for that. That's great. It's just having that reassurance that you are looking outside Wales and looking for best practice, which is the other phrase I was looking for. So that's great. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds there. So that's obviously yourself there. Just a final one for Councillor John Cleverly. Have you got anything that you wish to add just as a final round?
No, thank you, Chair. I'm fine.
No worries at all. Thank you, Councillor Cleverly.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Most of mine have been answered as part of that. You'll be glad to hear. So I don't know if either the officers or the cabinet member wishes to just leave some conclusion remarks at all, just from what they've heard today or anything else like that there before we move on to the other report. Would anyone like to conclude at all?
Happy to conclude, Councillor Marshall. I think what you've seen is again an excellent report in regard to education in Newport, and I think we can all be proud of that, because I think we all, as I stated in my opening statement, I believe as councillors we all contribute to that. We've got a really, really diverse population in Newport, and with that comes profound poverty. And I think our schools step up and go over and above to make that difference in our children's lives. And I think we need to reflect that and consider that in everything that we do. Also, you know, looking recently at our policy in regard to racism, the work's been undertaken with our schools this year has been absolutely phenomenal. I think there's so much to be proud of, and I think everybody can share that congratulations, because I think we all invest in making schools matter in Newport. So I think that concludes.
Thank you very much for that, Cabinet Member. I've just done the faux pas of COVID, but there we are. Thank you very much for that. So that is the conclusion of that item on the agenda of the Education Services End of Year Report. I believe now we're going to have a little bit of musical chairs, and we're going to go into the Children's Services End of Year Report 24-25. So I'll let the room configure. Start in a moment. Thank you.
Like, Chair, I just want to say I haven't put any specific recommendations about that. I might maybe just have to know the
Yes, please, Emily. Yeah, please. Okay, and I believe everyone is somewhat sat and comfortable. Hopefully, is everyone happy to move to the next part in a second? That's right. And Emily, did you say you wanted to raise just some of the facts of what was being said, or any feedback there as well, or do you want to save that to the end?
I haven't noted any specific recommendations from the education report, Chair. Just that the committee were content with the report. Is that, are you happy with that, or anything to add?
Yeah. On a personal level, I don't know about colleagues, but I think that was most of the fact. I think the questions were mostly answers, and no real recommendations there, unless colleagues want to correct me on that. So happy to proceed. I don't. Yeah, Councillor Harvey, I can see you've unmuted.
Yeah, I'm happy with that as well, Chair. Thanks.
No worries at all. Thank you for that confidence. Thank you. So I will move on to the next part, which is the Children's Services Report. Do we have the Cabinet Member, first of all, wishing to introduce the report, please?
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to hand over to Natalie shortly, but I just wanted to, whilst I've got an opportunity in a public forum, I just wanted to bring something up, if I may, Chair. It's regarding something that was in the media a couple of weeks ago with regards to a Reform UK councillor in Cambridgeshire who made a comment that children in care are not just naughty, they're downright evil. And I think it's, you know, down to us in Newport, and for me particularly, to basically say that that kind of language is wrong, it's harmful, and it's deeply unjust to our children in care. It shows a complete lack of understanding about their lives and the children that are in care and the ones that we support. Most children in care have experienced trauma, neglect and loss. They're not the problem. They are young people who need care, support and a chance to thrive. And from Newport, many do. Our children are incredible. They're full of strength, empathy and determination, and with the right support they go on to be brilliant adults who contribute hugely to their communities. More and more employers within Newport are realising that care experienced young people bring unique resilience and diversity of thought, qualities that benefit society as a whole. Of course, we know that outcomes still aren't good enough, and too many care experienced young people, but when a young person doesn't achieve the success or happiness, the first questions we should ask is not what is wrong with them, but what could we have done more to help them. The responsibility lies with us as the adult and the systems that surround them. In Newport, we take that responsibility seriously, which you'll see from the end of year report. And as corporate community parents, we back our young children. I feel that I want to call on Reform UK to reflect on the harm that's caused by these comments and to take part in real informed conversation about what children in care truly need, which is belief, compassion and opportunity. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm going to hand over to Nat.
I think just to begin with, I think it's just reiterating that in children's services, our priority is to support children to remain safely with their families. We have a real emphasis on preventative services alongside support for our families to explore their strengths and meet the needs of their children. Secondly, for us, when children are in our care and leave our care, we must do everything to support them to ensure that there are positive outcomes for our children. Children and families deserve services that are truly holistic and recognise the multifaceted nature of families' lives, and to ensure we can work together to meet this need. Partnership underpins our service. We work with families and a broad range of agencies to meet our stated outcomes and to offer the best possible services to our children. Certainly 24-25 is, it's not been without challenge. There obviously, people will recognise that there is a national recruitment and retention risk within our profession. And also there is continued day-to-day pressure on frontline social workers working with families with real complex needs. We have experienced demands from courts. We've seen a significant increase again in the referrals that come through to our front door. So in the last few years, we see an additional 1,000 referrals coming into the department. At the end of this year, we saw over 13,000 referrals. So we're averaging around 1,200 referrals per month into Newport. Despite that, I'm so proud of the team that I work with and the social workers that support the families in continuing on a journey of transformation. We continue to analyse the need within the city and respond accordingly. You'll note in my executive summary there have been a number of successes in 24-25, and we're also on a journey to delivering more transformation in 25-26. I'll just pick out a couple of the highlights. One being that we continue to expand our residential portfolio in line with the Eliminate policy change. We are developing our offer for care leavers, both in terms of supported accommodation for them, but also in terms of developing work experience opportunities, working collaboratively with employers within the city. We have looked, so our therapeutic offer to our children continues to address shortfalls that are a result of long waiting lists from the CAM services. We've received a good in our inspection by HMIP within our youth justice service. Newport Playing Field Partnership has been honoured as Partnership of the Year 2 years running at the National LTPF Award. And visits from our Minister for Social Services, Dawn Bowden, who has been to visit the partnership with Barnardo's, and wanted to see this replicated across Wales. the Bernardo's partnership also came second in the social care accolades, just to highlight that actually they came first last year, so to come second this year is absolutely fantastic. Again, 2025, 26, we continue to kind of develop opportunities to improve services in collaboration with families and the children's voice. So yeah, you know, I'm pleased to say that despite some of the challenges and societal pressures, we're continuing to deliver. Welcome any questions, Chair.
That's great. Thank you to the Cabinet member and also to you, Natalie, for that introduction. We will move into questions as noted there, and I would like to bring in Councillor Watkins for the first question there, please. Councillor Watkins.
Right. I've noticed that we're waiting for a number of properties which are being inspected or going to be inspected to bring them into being in regards to Cambridge House, Bridgeview, and they're all coming into being. Have we got any idea when that's happening?
Yeah.
Likely to happen?
Louise? Yeah, Cambridge House is now registered as a children's home. Bridgeview is imminent. We're waiting for we've had an inspector allocated. We'll be able to visit that at some point soon. We do currently have children residing there, which we've told the IW about. So that registration is going alongside the fact that we're using it for its purpose already. And our third property is to go into renovation. So that is likely to be near the latter part of this year, maybe early into next.
Following on from that, Chair, is how do we see the maintenance of these properties which we've actually purchased over the last 10 years, to maintain them in the standard which the authority needs?
We've got well-established homes in any case, so we factor that into our revenue budgets. So all of our planning going forward from the point of creating the plan for the expansion has included what we need to maintain these properties as a service area ongoing. So I think we've got quite realistic budgets aligned with that.
Do you see any, do you think there's going to be some sort of expansion into this sort of thing in regards to the future in 26, 27?
Well, we do have a very clear plan. So ultimately, Newport will have 41 beds, I hate referring to it as that, but we will have 41 spaces for children to reside in our residential provisions by 2027. So as you said, 4 actually this year, including Cambridge House. And then next year we plan to open a further home. If it so happens that we find the right property in the meantime, we've got some flexibility in our plan that we could bring that forward. So yeah, it's about finding the right places. But yeah, very, very definitely we want to get to that point of 41 beds as soon as we can.
So you're looking to expand wherever you possibly can when a suitable property comes up.
We're nearly there now, so we need to find at least one more home, and then we're just considering a second for children with disability, which is what Bridgeview is. So, yes. Yeah.
Do you see any issues other than finance?
I think we're very lucky in Newport because we've got a very well-established residential provision, and that's put us at somewhat of an advantage, I think. Particularly given we talked about eliminate, but given the eliminate agenda, that we can be quite self-sufficient, and alongside our fostering services then as well, really work closely with making sure that moving forwards the plans for the children are the best for them. So residential working quite closely with their therapeutic teams and our fostering team. And as I say, the advantage is we've done this for so long. I mean, Forest Lodge and Cambridge House originally have been around for decades. So it's a business that we're quite okay with.
I do have another one, Chair, but I'll wait for somebody else to.
No worries, Councillor Watkins. Thank you. I'll bring you in as part of the second round. That's not a problem there. I will go to the colleague next door to you, Councillor Bev Davis. Have you got any questions that you would like to raise, please?
Yeah, just a one, Chair. Just a short one. I noticed on page 30, there's a lot of information that's unavailable. Okay, what reason not for it? Please tell me that is not a report we just had.
Yeah, 30, I think it is. Yeah, 30 in the agenda or 30 on the report. Up to 20. Okay.
If it helps, Chair, I think it's page 21 of the actual report, rather than page 30 of our notes.
Yeah. So just to clarify, Councillor Davis, I think what you're referring to is information that wasn't available in years 21, 22, 22, 23, and because those were the COVID years, Welsh Government eased the reporting pressures on the local authorities as a whole to enable us to focus on managing the impact of the pandemic. So that's why that isn't available.
Thanks very much. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. I will bring in Councillor Deb Harvey there. If you have questions, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just the one for me. Why are we seeing more young people ending up in court, and what's being done to strengthen the early intervention? And are we confident that the new Youth Justice Hub will be able to turn this around?
Good morning, Councillor Harvey. How are you?
Morning.
Just to respond to your question, I was having a think about this morning, and what's been really interesting. I don't know if you remember, but over the last couple of years, we introduced the turnaround programme, and that's had a huge impact in terms of the work. Because I was trying to make sense of particularly our prevention figures. What you'll see is the trend is that we've seen a reduction in prevention figures, but actually what's happened, we had a recent letter actually congratulating us. It's because we've moved a lot of that work even earlier into the early intervention phase. So obviously, as you know, we're working with prevention and inclusion a lot around some of this work already. But it's really to say that Newport has been really successful. We've just had a recent letter of congratulations because we've exceeded our numbers. So what you're finding is actually what was previously open to us as a service in prevention has now moved even earlier. So we're actually intervening at a much earlier stage. But the other thing we've reflected on is actually the trends in terms of some of the risks that we're seeing, as you know yourself, some of the challenges that we're starting to experience. We've seen a definite increase in the types of concerning behaviour that's going on. As you know, there's always historical issues around theft of vehicles. That's a massive problem. But we have seen an increase in physical violence, particularly in carrying harmful weapons.
Yeah.
And you probably remember, you might have noticed in the report, what's also happened, and again, interestingly, the point that Tanya made about COVID and the impact of COVID, what you're seeing is the result of a significant amount of delays after COVID. So children weren't being processed through the criminal justice system in a timely manner, and that's had a huge impact. So what we're now seeing is a lot of that restorative work is happening at a later stage, and unfortunately for a lot of our children and young people, particularly, and it's not a massive cohort, but it's a particular cohort who've been involved in a lot of offending and now being dealt with by the criminal justice system. So what you're now seeing is the repercussions of that, because obviously they're being processed. And it might not be just one offence, it might be a couple of offences that are being dealt with. And the other bit that obviously we've just highlighted is the seriousness and gravity of some of those offences. So the more serious it is, the more likely it is that we're going to get it in the court arena. And we as a service chose to make a decision, particularly about knife-related crime, that we thought it was appropriate that the court oversees that particular matter and that issue and responds appropriately, because obviously it's such a concerning risk. So that's the content. Does that help? Does that?
Yeah, it's just, as you know, Jay, for me, I don't think kids should be in a courtroom, and that's the end of it. They shouldn't be there, they're children. However, when you see them getting coerced and groomed into these gangs and they're being taken, We're losing so many children. It does keep me awake. You see these kids on these housing estates and you think everything is fine, but when you scratch under the surface, Jay, they are being groomed and taken off into places they should never ever know about, never mind be caught up in. And my concern, what more can we do to try and prevent that in the first place? Because obviously prevention is exactly what it says it is preventing this. I know we're stretched for money. I know there is no funding available. But if we just get half a dozen kids out of this awful hamster wheel, it's got to be better than nothing.
Yeah, and absolutely right. It's the only thing that I think we can do as a service, particularly from the Strategic Partnership Board's point of view, is we will just continue to bring those cases to the board so we talk about those live issues. One of the bits of work that we're doing next is we've finally started to get a really good reflection of our data. So we're going to do a 5-year trend analysis to look at what's happening over that period of time to really dig deep and get a better understanding of the data. But I think it's also that part, you're absolutely right. All we can do is review the interventions that we're offering and try and think about different types of activities that we can provide children and young people. Obviously, I'm really excited, and as you know, I'm desperately keen to get the youth justice intervention up and running. I think that's going to make a big difference because we'll have a dedicated space. Obviously, there'll be an alternative education provision there as well, and I think that's the other bit, working closely with education. It's about keeping some of those children and young people who are at risk of being engaged in the right kinds of activity, and I think that's because, as you know, when they're not engaged in something, they're obviously getting involved possibly in stuff that they shouldn't be getting involved with.
Exactly.
And then the other bit, as you know, and obviously I know Councillor Cleverly has been involved in some of those meetings, is when we're talking about contextual safeguarding these days. There's a much better at the moment around that, and what we're looking at is place-based risk assessment. So we're meeting more regularly to discuss areas where there are places of concern, and as you know, Bettis was a great example of that. And actually it's just bringing all of the partners together to really strengthen our multi-agency working. And Bettis was a really good example of that, it was causing, as you know, a number of issues, and then just putting everybody together to develop a community based plan proved to be more effective. So I think we're doing more of that because, as you say, we're recognising extra familial harm is where the risks really are connected. It's not necessarily just in the family home these days, it's actually externalised risks, as you're saying rightly, it's organised crimes and gangs that are pulling people in, and it's really difficult. I think the two things I'll say, and I promise I'll be quiet after that, is we're doing a bit of work on developing a harmful weapon strategy. So as a region, we managed to get the OPCC to agree to fund it. So thankfully, Newport doesn't have to find any money to pay for that, which is great news. So that should be about looking at a strategic approach, as you know, from high level through to what we can do to support staff on the ground and try and address some of these issues. Hopefully, we'll come up with some recommendations and some guidance about what to do to improve practice. And I think lost my train of thought. I was going to respond with another thing. I do apologise.
Don't worry, Jay. I'm like it every day.
It's just about the interventions, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just, as we all know, if they don't fit in, some of them don't fit in at home, some of them don't fit in school. That's when these pariahs wade in. Oh, will you fit in with my gang? And off they go. And then we've lost them. It's just really concerning.
I think you're right. It's that was the other part. Sorry, thank you for reminding me. That was the bit. It's about increasing our engagement and about how we use our comms and media more effectively. And there's a bit of work that we're working with in terms of the Community Safety Partnership to look at how we can maybe use high-profile people that are based in Newport who can maybe help us convey a more positive message to engage young people. And I don't know if you're aware, but obviously we did recently, we had some grant funding for some virtual reality headsets, which we're trying to use digital technology and digital features. And that's hopefully going to help children and young people to make slightly better decisions because it takes them through the experience. But obviously we can trial that and see if it works. But, you know, get back to your point, and as you know, it's just about continued partnership working with all partners to try and see if we can develop new ways of addressing some of these challenges. And some of this stuff has happened, you know, kind of almost further ahead of us. We're trying to play catch up and make sure that we're ahead of the game.
Yeah, thanks, Jay.
Thanks very much, both.
Thanks, Chair.
Before I bring Councillor Cleverly in, I just wanted to come back and piggyback off the question just raised. I know, Jay, you were saying about the partnerships and side of things. I know I'm obviously the chair of the other committee on that side, but I just wanted to ask what the partnership scope like in terms of what you note. And I know sometimes there could be issues about how they implement the delivery, if that makes sense on that side. So there may be different ways and, you know, different priorities that affect. So just would you be able to advise us about how that partnership is running versus, you know, is there anything that we can do to support you in making it a stronger partnership?
I think I have to say, and I really mean this, Newport is very good at developing partnerships and we work really closely with each other. And I'm just thinking about even the relationship between some of our external partners such as Newport Live, for example, as you know, and obviously prevention and inclusion. We use, for example, one of the things that is a great example of this is the use of the Children and Communities Grant, particularly PPYP, which is called basically the Promoting Positive Engagement Funding. So we work really closely to use that grant funding. One of the bits of work was about providing a better outreach offer in the community. What we try and do then is to not create duplication so that not everybody's doing exactly the same thing. So actually you've got a better multi-agency offer on the ground and particularly in areas of concern or locations of concern. So really, we're continually reviewing that on a regular basis. So it's normally got a quarterly review process and we meet collectively to talk about the use of those funds, whether or not the model that we're providing is the right model at this moment in time. So just to give you that as a crystal clear example, one of them was just about providing better youth work provision and better outreach for children and young people in communities. I think the challenge, Councillor Marshall, if I'm being honest, is just we'd like more of it, you know, and if we could have a detached youth offer, that would be amazing. But, you know, as you know, and as Councillor Harvey's already highlighted, the issue is about accessing grant funding. And we're doing our very best to always try and identify pockets of money. And I can give you a really good example, even within the youth justice context. We have recently we have a fantastic speech and language therapist who's a grade 7 in our service. Newport opted to work with education to increase that. So we've got almost a full-time post in Newport, which is fantastic. But what's happened is that person's then developed a regional report recently, and we're going to be looking to get some serious violence funding to try and expand that offer, because as you know, speech and language is a massive issue for our children and young people, particularly the ones that don't always get screened or picked up early. So what we're trying to do is increase that offer so that we can have a better prevention response for children and young people, so we can do more of that outreach and try and pick stuff up. So we're hoping that we can increase some of that funding to develop an assistant role to that role so they could do more direct work with children and young people. And the aspiration, the aim is to have a screening out process rather than screening in, so that all children and young people that are coming through our particular arena are being picked up much earlier, and then we identify whether or not there is a speech and language need. If that's not, then obviously they just access services through mainstream support. But if there are, then it means we can identify it a little bit earlier and try and address some of those barriers. So it's just to give you a couple of examples of how we're doing things differently.
No, that's brilliant, Jay. In a live example, as you said, the kind of fantastic work that partnerships do, and I see firsthand, obviously in my role on one of the other committees and through other roles held previously. It's interesting you note about that side of things about detached youth offer, so that's something to raise back, and I'm sure obviously the cabinet member is well rehearsed in that as well, and will be actioning that where she can as well. So on that side, so that's really positive. I will bring in now Councillor Cleverly. Thank you for adhering to my question there. I know I said I'll bring you in next, so thank you for your patience, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all. I think my question might run into what Deb was just saying. I'm concerned about the care leavers. On page 49, it says increased housing options for care leavers, and it's in the orange. And I noticed it's not going to be the expected completion date is not until next year, next March 26. And if they do leave early, they will be getting into things like Deb was just saying, you know, and, you know, what options are there for care leavers? That was my question. Thank you.
You're okay for me to respond? Is that okay?
Yes.
You're absolutely right to raise it. I think some of the frustrations that we've experienced, particularly with the care leaver accommodation options, as you know, we probably had this discussion previously, but one of the provisions is taken a very, very long time for it to come online. And I understand some of the delays were due to the decanting of previous residents, so that caused a significant delay. But some of the other complexities is around planning applications, and maybe if that's something that you could be more, if you could assist them and help with in future, it's that streamlining, particularly when we're trying to get certain provisions online. I understand that planning processes can take quite a fair chunk of time, and it's about that coordination between the two, particularly in terms of departments. So if you can help with that, that would be great. But I guess it's also to say to you, in terms of existing options, obviously what we've done in Newport is refer to private providers that we've been using to try and support care leavers. I think we've recognised that there is a need for supported accommodation, and that's also formed part of our ongoing plan. Just to really update you, we have just recently undertaken a bit of a scoping exercise to identify what we've got. The plan is that we're going to be developing an accommodation framework. We've got the help of somebody, particularly in Lou's team, who's an ace at this particular aspect of work, and he's helping us to identify what that framework needs to be looking like. And we're planning to take that report to our DNT, which Tanya oversees, in order to really talk about what we're going to do next. But this piece of work is also currently sat under our Eliminate board, so there's a governance structure overseeing it at this point in time. But as you know, acquiring properties, I'm sure Lou will confirm this as well, acquisition of properties, getting the right provider, the right support provider. We're going to be working with FLAMI in most of these cases. Takes time, and unfortunately, because of the length of time, sometimes the council has to resort to what we call kind of bespoke purchases. We have to privately procure stuff.
And unfortunately, Newport have got a housing crisis, and for people to get flats and whatever is just off the wall.
And you're absolutely right. There's a massive challenge, isn't there, in terms of provision. I think the important bit is there's a great bit of work. Looking forward to the work with housing, but we've already got a really good partnership at the moment. We're working really closely with one of my colleagues, my service manager colleagues in housing, who oversees the accommodation component. There's better joint working, so we're also jointly commissioning things these days, which is much better. So we're getting better value for money for the council, which is really positive. But I think it's also that bit about planning. What we've got better at is having conversations about planning for our care leavers specifically. And what we're trying to do is just ensure that all the necessary preparation work is taking place beforehand, that when they turn 18, there isn't a cliff edge for that young person. They don't experience that challenge. I mean, it's just to acknowledge your point. It is a massive challenge, isn't it, in terms of provision.
I know.
But I think
and it's ongoing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, thank you, Jay.
To get on to your question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's fine.
Thank you both. It just reminds me of a kind of question there, which will maybe in the long term. Is there a possibility in future to have an update about care experience, basically young people? I know we obviously passed a motion at council, so it'd just be nice to have an update basically about how that's going, what's been done, what are the challenges and stuff, just to see about A, for accountability wise, but B, also to see about how we can also assist as councillors, not necessarily always challenging, to make sure that we can A, be helpful, but also make sure that we lead in the right direction. Is that a possibility, please?
So that's a really great point, Councillor Marshall. And in fact, very soon we've got a strategy around our community parenting strategy and action plan, which will outline exactly what you've just asked for. So that strategy will outline what our offer of support is for our care experienced young people and how we plan to achieve that. And that is coming through the political process as we speak. I've just seen a final draft of the report from Jay this week, so it will be coming forward.
That's fantastic to hear, and obviously I know about the work in the background, but it's also positive for colleagues to be made aware. Obviously that's coming, and that's really, really positive to know that it's still on the agenda, and it's still being looked and reviewed and still being held to account, if you will, on that side. So again, I do appreciate that there. I note Councillor Perkins has had to leave early, so obviously I can see it's just Councillor Watkins there. So I will move online to Councillor Harvey. Did you have any other questions there, just to make sure? Oh, Councillor Harvey, sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, yes, I did, and I've lost it because I got that many pages where I thought, oh yeah, I'll print that one, and now I don't know what I've done with them.
That's fine. Do we?
I'm
do you
having
want
one
to
of
come
them
round?
days today.
That's fine, Councillor Harvey. Do you want me to come back around?
It was about the racism and how we are coping with the racism, and is it being addressed properly?
So what I can say to you is that dealing with the impact of racism, not just from an operational point of view, but from a workforce point of view, we've been taking a double-pronged approach. So Welsh Government have issued the anti-racist workforce plan, which we are, in fact, some of our officers were at an event last week. So that will be embedded within our workforce plan about how we make sure that our workforce is representative of the population that we serve, but also on a case-by-case basis, when the social workers are working with families, with children, clearly they will be dealing with and managing those issues on a day-by-day basis and dealing with the impacts, role modelling to make sure that, you know, if they're faced with sort of racist behaviour, that is challenged in the appropriate way. So we're taking a multi-pronged approach to that issue.
Last one from me, please, Chair, if I can. How are we managing our staff who are dealing with really complex issues? Because we're sort of councillors in the wards and we get a little bit of it, but our staff, especially social workers, are in it 24 hours a day, and it's got to take its toll. So what is there to protect the staff and support them? Because ultimately they're going to have mental health issues the same as everybody else. It's a lot, it's a big burden for them to carry.
Yeah, I'll answer that, Councillor Harvey. So just in terms of, you know, we recognise, you know, this is really challenging for all of our practitioners, and you know, we certainly shouldn't be complacent about, you know, what they're, you know, seeing, you know, what they're being exposed to on a day-to-day basis. So what we do is we offer debrief sessions, particularly within our residential service, so who are, you know, day-to-day experiencing challenges from our, I suppose, our most emotionally challenged young people. We offer supervisions both informally and formally for our social work and social care practitioners, and also we invest in clinical supervision. So our social workers not only have supervision from their line managers, but they also have the opportunity to engage with a clinical supervisor, which is independent of their line manager. There's also the opportunity for our staff to access the provision that is provided by the council. So staff are referred there where necessary. I'm really proud of the way that we work within children's services, because we do have a positive culture. We do have an open door policy where staff can approach all of us. You know, I have positive relationships with, you know, the majority of my staff who come to me regularly, and I know that my service managers also have that interface with all of the staff. So there's that opportunity to engage with them. But yeah, you know, it's really tough out there, but you know, the welfare of our staff is certainly a priority for all of us.
Definitely, because people see them as, oh, they're social workers, it's their job, they have to, they've got to. They also have a home life, and they also have the same problems as the rest of us have on a day-to-day business. They're not just a social worker, there's a human behind that as well that's trying to live their life.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, both. So my questions relate to staff, so I'll come in now, obviously, because it's a natural part to bring in. So the first question is basically in relation to safeguarding training and our staff overall, I believe, as well. So we've made, obviously, some real progress of getting, you know, the new staff and staff generally to go through safeguarding training. But just a question of whether or not that safeguarding training itself is making a difference, you know, on the ground, and what we're doing just to make sure that it is basically allowing us to make safer decisions and fewer safeguarding concerns in practice, but also the content of those safeguarding forms and you know, duty to report forms are coming out as best as they can be. So it'd be just interesting to hear that point, please.
Yeah, I'll take this, Chair, if that's okay. So just for members to be aware that the council has set up a new corporate safeguarding board, which is now overseeing safeguarding across the whole of the council. But specifically to hone in on your question around safeguarding training within social services, there is a new new safeguarding standards training which is coming out, which basically goes from level 1 to 6. And level 1 is a very basic level of training that not just social workers and social care staff, but all staff across the council need to undertake. And that our current basic safeguarding training meets that level 1 standard here in Newport. And then there are these standards have just been introduced this year. So we're on the road to making sure that social workers, who I believe will need a standard a level 3 and possibly 4, depending on the role that they have. The Regional Safeguarding Board is in the process of commissioning that training, so that will then be rolled out to our staff. That's not to say that our staff have had no safeguarding training. They absolutely have. It's just a new model that is being which is being rolled out on a national basis. So within Wales, we can have assurance that depending on the job that you do, you will have been trained to a certain level. So I just want to show you that that is in train, and also the corporate safeguarding board will be monitoring the levels of training that is undertaken department by department, and also any safeguarding issues that come to the fore across the whole of the council will be discussed and raised and addressed at that corporate board.
That's great, thank you, Tanya. And just to back on that side of thing again, with the duty to report forms, are they in a light sense kind of like graded to see how the substance of those reports are, in order for us to understand how we can be better generally across the council about submitting good duty to reports, to make sure that we can give those that need to work upon them the best armoury that we can, to make sure that all are safeguarded that needs to be?
Yeah, I think Natalie will be able to come in here if she feels she needs to, but all of those duty to report forms get screened by our information and advice team, our front door team. And if there's a particular agency maybe where the quality of those referrals, those duty to report forms are not good, they haven't got full information, or we're not clear about what what concerns they're trying to report, that team will go back to that individual. Or if it's an emerging issue, Natalie will raise that with the agency concerned at her level, her opposite number, if you like, to raise that concern. And you know, I'm not saying in Newport, but historically in my experience that has happened. And then we've gone back to a particular agency, and then there's been certain training that has been delivered to make sure that we can improve the quality of that. And I'm confident that that system is here in Newport as well. And Natalie is nodding by the side of me, which tells me that that is the case, Chair.
No, that's great, Tanya. Thank you for that confirmation. I think it's just important to realise that fact, because it's, even though it's mandatory by law that we have to fill in a duty to report form, we have to also make sure that it's the best that it can be, rather than just a few lines just because we have to, if that makes sense. So thank you for that answer. I think the other one is mainly just about staff engagement on the ground, something that obviously has been, of interest to me in the past. And I think, it's interesting that we noted about the clinical supervisor side of things, which is a fantastic side of things. I know does make a huge improvement and motivation for staff generally. Just want to know, is there other ways that you can tell us about how staff are supported and valued about what they feel or thoughts, and what's the plan to turn that feedback into change to make sure that they feel supported and therefore motivated within the workforce?
Yeah, sorry, I'm on a roll. Sorry, Chair. So yeah, just briefly then. So we have in the throes of developing what we call a workforce development plan, which has got 3 strands to it. One is about how we recruit the right staff, how we retain our staff, and how we look after the well-being of our staff. And as part of that plan during this year, we are going to be doing a staff survey across the whole of social services, which we will be testing and asking for feedback from our staff. We're in the throes of developing that survey, likely to go out in the autumn, and whatever comes back through that survey, we will then use that to inform how we can further support our staff. So that goes alongside all the things that Natalie previously outlined in relation to how we support staff. So we definitely want to hear the voice of our staff and act on what they say, to improve their, them being employees in Newport City Council.
Thank you. It just adds to the point of retention, isn't it? If they're happy to work for Newport, we can hopefully have the ones that definitely aspire, they're motivated, but also gives them the ability to think and be creative, which we obviously want to allow to fruit as well, because that's where we get some of our best ideas and initiatives. So again, thank you for that response. I will bring in Councillor John Reynolds now, if you wish to come in with questions there, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got 2 quick questions, that's okay. Just before I ask my questions, though, I just want to just concur with the earlier comment of the Cabinet member. I know this is an apolitical meeting, but I'm addressing the comments, not the politics. I work with children in care, as you know, and because I know that most of those children, they've endured abuse and neglect beyond the comprehension of most of us, to be honest. I found the description of children in care by that Reform councillor just offensive beyond words. I was absolutely disgusted. So I just wanted to echo and support the comments of the Cabinet member earlier. But onto the questions. The first one's been pretty well covered, to be honest. Jay gave a really comprehensive overview of this earlier, but maybe I don't know if there's any additional comments. It's regarding preventing the offending and reoffending. And obviously I want to avoid any unhelpful stereotyping, but I'm just wondering if you could give a bit more sort of details or examples, particularly involving the prevention strategies to avoid this. And again, from my own experience, I just know children in care, they're particularly vulnerable, obviously, to grooming. This was covered by Councillor Harvey earlier. And I know people do tend to associate the word grooming maybe with sexual exploitation quite a lot, but obviously it involves grooming involving drug gangs, organised crime, and so many other things. So I don't know whether Jay or anybody else just wanted to add any other comments to what you already said on that. And then I've got one other question afterwards, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Reynolds, just to say in response to that, so just a couple of things. In Newport, we have been operating the child exploitation toolkit process for some time, and there's a bit of work being done to review that piece of work. We've just had some research undertaken by Cardiff University, and we're due to have the results of that research fairly imminently to look at the effectiveness of that process. But obviously, it's just to assure you, a proportion of those will be children and young people who are looked after, and we do regularly discuss and meet to plan around how to address some of those concerns. What's really positive in Gwent is that we have Operation Courts, which the police contribute officers specifically dedicated to criminal exploitation. Yeah. That's really positive. I've not experienced that in other authorities, so it's a really, really good bit of work that we've got here. So it's really to just say to you, there's always a proactive strand here, and I think that's going to be an interesting outcome. So once the findings from the research come out, obviously they can be shared with you. It'll be available for public consumption. So more than happy to share that with you in terms of its recommendations. I'm sure there'll be things that we want to do differently, 100%. I think the other thing to share with you, we've recognised this, and Natalie and I have talked about this a number of times. In all these justice services, we offer, particularly for children looked after, there's an offer called RACLA. It used to be called something else, PCLA, but I think what we've recognised is actually our particular group of young people, we don't necessarily feel that RACLA is the right offer, that our children and young people need something slightly different. So we're going to be having a meeting to review that piece of work. It's primarily befriending offer, but sometimes actually what happens with our children and young people is that if we offer the befriending solution, they say, thank you very much, but no thank you, for all sorts of different reasons. And it might be because they've already been overwhelmed with a number of different relationships they're already working with. So we're going to do a little bit of work to try and identify and work out how better to support them, because actually what they do need is that consistency in that relationship. And sometimes it's almost that offer of, well, we're going to be here whether you want that offer initially or not. So it's about that steadiness of support. So it's just to sort of say to you, we need to review RACLA. I'm not convinced it's been as effective as it could have been. And I think we need to do more around supporting our children and young people in that capacity. And Lou and I are also doing a bit of work at the moment with police colleagues around, particularly, as you're aware of, there's the decriminalisation protocol of looked after children. There's national guidance available. What we want to do is refine it even better in Newport, work with our police partners to look at a thresholding document to support staff and police so that they respond to children and young people more effectively, particularly when they are from a care experience background. So there's a little bit of detailed work there. As you know, there's lots of strands. I think the important bit is that we're recognising them as a disproportionate group as well, in the same way that we recognise Black ethnic minority groups or anybody from a disproportionate group. We're also recognising that care experience is also a key factor, and we need to do more work around that in terms of supporting this group. And that's part of our disproportionality action plan, which gets discussed then at the Youth Justice Board on a quarterly basis. So it's just to say to you, there's a number of governance boards where it has oversight as well. Once there's some more work happening, I can definitely update you at a later date if you want to know more about that.
That's great. Thank you, Jay. I've got one more question, if that's okay, Chair. It's the old chestnut. I think I ask this question on virtually every meeting I go to that involves social services or children or children's care, but it is the eliminate agenda. Obviously in the report it's still showing as a red risk, understandably. I'm just wondering, as an update really, what are the current sort of main challenges that you're finding regarding the eliminate agenda? And what's being done to engage some of the private companies who might even at this stage still be burying their heads in the sand? Just wanted an update on that, really. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll take that, Councillor Reynolds. So in terms of engaging the private providers, I know that the 4Cs have been in contact and written out to some of those providers. In terms of the children that we have that are currently in for-profit provisions, some of them we have engaged to determine whether or not they are willing to become not-for-profit. Some are still reluctant to do so, which I suppose then for us is a challenge then in terms of ensuring that those children are moved into Newport provision, hence why we're developing more and more beds for our children.
Yeah.
The other challenge, I suppose, for us at the moment is financially, because those children that are currently in for-profit provisions, or we need to still put in for-profit provisions, a number of them will either come off the framework, the 4Cs framework, so there's no governance in terms of what they actually charge us. And so year on year we are seeing hikes in prices of those private provisions. We are hopeful by 2027, so although Eliminate doesn't come into force until 2030, Newport is still on the journey that we will be meeting the policy by 2027. So we track all of our children that are currently in for-profit provision, and each of those children have plans then to move into Newport provision moving forward. There are some providers out there, so we've got Action for Children who have just opened a property opposite Cambridge House that will be supporting our children with disabilities. So there are some providers out there that are going not for profit, but essentially we want, you know, looking for, I suppose, value for money, but also greater governance to develop our own provision and become self-sufficient within Newport. So that's our plan moving forward.
Okay, that's great, thank you. I mean, my only sort of follow-up question, you've partially touched on this anyway, actually, but my follow-up question was going to be, does there seem to be any appetite with the for-profit companies to come under the not-for-profit umbrella? But it doesn't sound like there's much of an appetite for that from what you said.
No, Councillor Reynolds, there isn't much, I suppose, engagement really from those providers in becoming not for profit. Ultimately, I suppose they're businesses, and you know, I'm not sure what their financial commitments are that would enable them to achieve that.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much there. I will bring in, just in case, Councillor Jan Cleverly, do you have anything that you wish to raise at this point, please? Councillor Jan Cleverly? Okay, we'll try and come round at Councillor Cleverly might be having issues on that side. If I come back now to Councillor Trevor Watkins, I believe you had a point that you wish to raise, please.
I have three, Chair.
You may have 3 points then, Councillor Watkins, thank you.
Page 3 of the report, looking forward to 25-26. Bullet point 3. Systems review of children's services in cooperation, co-production with staff and services. Could somebody expand on that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we're on a journey of transformation within children's services, and I suppose what we want to operate is a service that's fit for practice, a service that will kind of meet the current needs of the citizens within Newport. So essentially what we're doing is engaging in a review of our service using the Vanguard model.
The Director of Social Services were talking about consulting with staff and providers. Is that where it fits in together?
In part, but
Right.
in part, but Natalie's got, it's a bigger picture than that.
Yeah. So we want to look at the whole service. What is the current offer to our families? So we're engaging with people that are currently accessing our services, or people that have accessed our services and come out of our services, to really understand what it's like, what's their experience of going through children's services, but not only service users, but also professionals. So we're on a journey stage by stage in terms of looking at our processes, systems, experiences, to determine actually, are we fit for purpose? Do we need to be operating slightly differently? We're also engaged with SLICE in terms of, we've got that external voice then from, I suppose, that external agency to seek the voice of the citizen in terms of their experience of accessing the systems within Newport Children's Services. That could result in change in practice, change of delivery. This also, I think, will assist us when we're developing our new client database, which is Mosaic. So actually we may be able to streamline services, which will enable staff to have less time operating systems and inputting data, and more time with our service users. So we're on that journey. We've got a little way to go. I think we're probably not going to be I suppose in terms of findings, I think it's going to be, you know, next year definitely. By the time we've collated all that information, analysed it, met with all the stakeholders and our staff workforce to determine next steps really. But we wanted it to be rather a done to practice. We wanted to engage all of our staff and stakeholders and service users to inform what steps we take to change and transform services.
So we're looking at an outcome somewhere around about late 26.
Yeah, I would suggest so, yeah.
Could
It's a massive piece of work.
Yeah, could you bring that sort of brief report to, so we can look at it?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. Yeah.
The second question you actually did mention about the database, where that is going to fit into it. The other one, going back quite a few years, Councillor Lacey and myself were in partnership working around some of the properties where children were being looked at. That now has been delegated to services, managers to look at and report to Welsh Government. But we've never seen the outcomes of those properties. And because we've got more properties now online within HCC, could we have a brief update of the condition of these properties and anything which is found that needs to be dealt with, either on a medium term or urgent term?
I'll hand over to Louise. So Louise has taken, under the risk of regulations, Louise has taken over responsibility as the registered individual for all of our children's homes. So Louise has to go into all of our children's home and provides an extensive report in terms of, you know, what her findings are, and all of them have a RAG rated action plan that sit beneath that. That report comes to myself. I have to read all of those, and then I write relevant comments. I don't know if you want to go into a little bit more detail, Lou, just in terms of...
The quality assurance around the role of the responsible individual is looking at the care supported to the children there, but equally the environment they're living in. So is that what you mean, material asset condition?
Okay.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we've never seen any reports since it's been delegated to officers, which then goes direct to Welsh Government. But we've never seen any report back of what actually the outcomes were of those inspections. So I would like that possibly a little future date.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've got a number of different mechanisms. I think that those feedback.
Sure,
yeah, and we have externally, we have CIW inspect as well. So actually, I've got feedback this afternoon with an inspector, because as of April this year, when CIW conduct inspections of children's homes now, they're rated. So for 4 areas of care, there are ratings from excellent through to 4. So those are you know, that as well through scrutiny. So to crystallise that, so we're clear, and then make sure that you know we present the information that you ask for. You're asking for. So as Louisa said, we have to monitor the quality of care. It's not just the care, it's the environment, it's the building, it's whether it's in disrepair or not. So it would be a massive report if we were to bring all of those individual home reports to scrutiny. But what we can do, I think, and please tell me if this is what you're looking for, is that overarching assurance that we got X number of homes, we've done X number of quality assurance visits, and this is what those visits have told us in relation to the quality of care and the state of the physical state of the buildings. Is that what you're asking for?
Any really substantial concerns you have in regards to that?
Yes, certainly. We can bring that forward to committee.
Could I see clarity, through the scrutiny advisor, whether or not that may come under place in corporate? Does any of these get reported to place in corporate, just to make sure that we're not overstepping?
No, it doesn't go into place in corporate.
That's fine, thank you. Just obviously because it's assets, whether or not it does, so we just wanted that clarity. Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Watkins, did you have anything else there, or was that it? Sorry.
Oh, that was it. The 2 questions were answered all on the first one. So.
No worries, very efficient service for you, Councillor Watkins. There we are. I think everyone's now wanting the coffee, so we're getting quick fire questions. Oh, good. Okay, so if I go to last round, so we've had yourself, Councillor Watkins, now Councillor Debbie Harvey, anything from you?
Sorry, Chair, I couldn't find my button. No, nothing from me, thanks.
No worries at all, thanks very much there. And yourself from Councillor John Reynolds there?
Nope, I'm done now, thanks, Chair.
No worries at all. And yourself, Councillor Jan Cleverly?
I'm fine, thank you, Chair.
No worries, thank you. And all questions on mine have been somewhat answered as well there. Sorry, was someone in the room going to speak then? Oh, sorry, like a little glitch there. Apologies, thank you.
Can we thank the team for their report, Chair?
Say again, sorry?
Can we thank the team for their report?
Of course we can as a committee, yeah, thank you.
And the good work they're doing.
Appreciate it, and that does speak on behalf of the committee, I'm sure, so thank you very much for that, Councillor Cleverly there. So I've done the round robin on that side there. So before we go into conclusions, can we just double check for Sam, do we have any recommendations or anything or comments that we're expressing, please?
Yeah, I haven't got any recommendations or comments, but I have captured Councillor Watkins' requests for the service review report before the committee when that's complete, and for the residential home report summary items. I've also captured, Chair, about what you were talking about, the community parenting strategy. So that's going to overview on the 24th of July. I'll circulate that to committee when it's published as well. Outside of that, I've only got the we're content with the report as it is.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much there. So I'll leave the closing remarks to either the cabinet member or the officers, whoever wants to take the mix, please.
Thank you. If I may, I think it's just welcome your thanks and to convey my thanks to the whole team in Children's Social Services as well. And I think, as you can see from the report, you know, it's an extremely complex and very challenging area that covers, you know, a multitude of areas. But even within that complexity and that amount of work, we're still going through a transformation of the service, because we understand that we can't continue as is. We have to look at things and deep dive, and that's what the team are also doing on top of the day job as well, is looking at transforming that service, and not just transforming the service, you know, from a money saving perspective, but to make sure that it's right for the citizens of Newport. And that's what it is. It's about our children, it's about our families, and I think that's what you see within children's services is that is the mantra. It's about our children, and as community parents that we all are, you know, it's about what the best outcomes for our children are. And you know, the staff sat with me now, the staff through all the teams and the staff in our homes, they're amazing. And I've said this a number of times in cabinet, and reiterate my thanks to the work that gets done in such in such dire and complex situations, you know, and these people are changing people's lives for the better. They're pulling them out of situations that might have taken them down a different route, and through their tenacity and hard work continue to, you know, provide what's best for our future in Newport, really. So just put my thanks on record that we've given this opportunity to speak. Thanks, Chair.
Saying thank you very much, cabinet member. Sorry, I'm getting a faux pas. I'm going between different things, so apologies. But no, thank you very much, cabinet member. Is there anything else that officers wish to note or to comment from what they've heard today at all?
No, thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much there. Always trying to make sure that we get the space just to make sure if you do there. So appreciate that. Thank you very much there. So that's the conclusion of that item report there. I don't know if you want to make your leave there and have your coffees and everything else like that there. Maybe a quick tea cake on the side. But thank you very much for your attendance today.
Yeah, thank you.
I've just had mine delivered.
I wish mine would be as well. Thank you, Councillor.
I have to say, Councillor Harvey, just seeing you walking off there and with your background, the rumours are true then, you really do walk on water.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I do.
Bit of comedy. I think we definitely need in the sugar now as we move on, but it won't be long, colleagues, on this last point. So if I can invite Sam for the last bit, which is the Scrutiny Advisor Report, looking at the agenda items of actions arising, the forward work programme update, and the outcomes monitoring. So I'll leave that over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go through really quickly, our actions, we've got no update on those because they're both ongoing, but nothing to worry about, they're longer term actions. Our forward work programme, you'll notice the meeting time's been updated as we discussed in our last meeting. And our next meeting is the 22nd of July at 4:30, so the pre-meet will be at 4. I know a number of members did raise a couple of concerns about those meeting times, and I will pick that up with Councillor Reeks, and we'll have a discussion there and how quickly we back to members. And finally, on our outcomes, they are all complete. Unfortunately, it didn't come out, the responses didn't come back before I published this agenda, but they are all complete now. And I'll circulate a copy of those just for members' information after the meeting as well. But that's all from me, Chair.
No worries, thank you. And likewise, what I've noted as chair in one of the other committees there, just to remind colleagues, if they wish to raise any items for the forward work plan or bring any witnesses or anything else like that that they may think may help further, our understandings of items on the agendas, please make that aware, whether in this forum or via email. So there's that there. Other than that, I'm happy to note that we are closing the meeting there, 1 minute past the 2 hours there on that side, but hopefully we'll have lunch, have some caffeine, some sugar. I'm not going to say have a cake on me because I'm definitely wanting some chocolate cake myself, so I am a chocoholic on that side. So I appreciate your time, colleagues, and I will close it there. Thank you very much all.
Thanks all.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Chair. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Bye all.